Welcome to the Farm Family Harmony podcast. I'm Elaine Farm family coach, here with another episode full of transition tips, tactics, and sometimes hard truths to get harmony on your farm. Hi, folks. Welcome to another episode of the Farm Family Harmony podcast. And I'm really excited today to bring my guest, Emily Nichols. Her name rhymes with pickle, just like Elaine phrase rhymes with phrase. And today, Emily and I are going to talk about farm women are not one of the guys. And Emily has a very interesting background. She grew up on a farm near Blenheim, Ontario. And in her bio, it says where her early jobs were hoeing beans, grating onions, picking rocks, and making boring tasks fun for her sisters. So, Emily, you have an engineering degree, not only an engineering degree, you have 2 engineering degrees and a master's, but you're talking a lot of things beyond just what we would say standard practice of engineering. So just tell us a little bit about yourself and the keynote that you've been developing about not one of the guys.
Sure. Well, Elaine, so maybe just to connect that whole farm background and engineering for people, I went to the University of Guelph as my undergrad, and it was a bit of a funny transition, going from being part of a farm family, going to the University of Guelph, which has such a strong presence in agriculture, but being part of the engineering school there, because engineering at Guelph started out as agricultural engineering. That's not a program they offer anymore. I took systems engineering, but engineers are a group that, especially in undergrad, there's a lot of hype, there's a lot of spirit. They want to set themselves apart. There was this phrase, engineers rule the world, which never resonated for me because I was also part of the Aggies. I wanted to connect with everyone. And so, now my speaking, I speak about human skills for technical people. And all of that stuff that I talk about really goes back to the early days of being on the farm and then joining the engineering world. Because when I told my grandpa, who was a farmer, I told him what I was going to study for university. I said, I'm going to go into engineering. You know what? He was my hero. He was such a cheerleader for me. I expected him to be excited, and he didn't respond the way I expected. He said, "Oh, I dealt with an engineer once."
Oh boy, that was pretty.
Yeah. So then he told me the backstory, which sometimes I do share in my keynotes, and that's really what set in motion for me this paying attention to people, making sure that people feel included, and always doing your best job to connect with whatever group you're with, and also not setting yourself apart. Engineers rule the world.
Yeah. Well, the other thing I like about your bio intro is not only do you have your degrees and masters in engineering, but you also have SE, which is your sense of humor. So I really appreciate that, Emily. And as we talk today, the one thing that really landed for me when I listened to your TED Talk was, as a little girl, you would drive down the farm roads in southwestern Ontario and southern Ontario and always wish that you could see a blue harvester silo that said Janet Smith and Daughters. And I grew up on that farm because my father was the first one in Manitoba to have a blue harvester silo. And it said Norman B. Eady and Sons. And my mom was an integral part of how that farm ran for over 40 years. And so what I'm discovering as a farm family coach, where I wanted your insight, is the language that women in agriculture can use to be understood better, particularly the ones who want to be the successors of the farm. Like I've spoke to the Grain Farmers of Ontario Leadership Women in Agriculture seminar a while back, and women were coming to me and saying, Elaine, I'm an agronomist. I've proven myself, and yet it doesn't seem to be that my father understands my passion or desire to be that next generation on the farm, just like your grandfather didn't understand your passion and desire to be an engineer. So tell us more about how the importance of the words we choose, because I think that's really your strong superpower, is helping us look at what comes out of our mouth and that we get to choose that.
Mm-hmm. Well, so in the first part of my keynotes, my first task is always to show people that words are connected to the world, our concept of the world, even our physical world, right? And so the example of, for you, the Blue Harvester silo, for me, it tended to be in Southern Ontario, it tended to be bank barns. Usually that had family names on them.
Right.
And on our farm, we didn't ever have a family name on it. So it wasn't a particularly personal story for me. It wasn't super close to home, but even as a young child, it was something that I noticed as we drove around. You'd see, and sons, and sons, and sons. So first off is to show people that words are connected to our world. And when we see a barn that says, and sons, that's a very physical embodiment that tells us, like, this place belongs to these people. And the women are left out. Right, my mom was a huge part of our farm as well, and even though the name wasn't on the barn, the concept was still there, that agriculture is about the guys, right? Farmers are men. Actually, I spoke to an early childhood educator not too long ago, and we said, you know, when you ask little kids, like, what's this? And you hold up a figure for them, they'll say, oh, that's a fireman. Okay, now this one, it's a policeman. Now this one, she said, the little kids will say the farmer man. They will actually add the word man onto it. I think it goes to show us that, you know, as humans, we really like patterns. We like patterns. They make sense. So police officer, firefighter, farmer, that doesn't make a linguistic pattern, but still it's a nicer, more inclusive language to use. And also when I talk about words connecting to our world, I talk about personal protective equipment. And I think this is really relevant in agriculture as well, as my manufacturing background, because if personal protective equipment is going to keep us safe, it has to fit properly. Right?
And for women working in barns and with livestock and needing to have protective equipment, their farmer gloves don't always fit them properly, which is why when I was at a farm trade show, Emily, and I found some Rosie Riveter gloves from California that were actually made for women, I got really excited.
Yeah. I mean, those things matter. And so once people understand, once I've been able to demonstrate with using a few stories that words actually do shape our physical world, then people are usually a little bit more on board to listen to, you know, what are some things we could do to change our language? And I've got a good story for you. So for the general population, popular culture, you know, a lot of people know about the TV show Survivor, and it's been on TV for such a long time, like 20 years. And the host, Jeff, had this signature phrase, come on in, guys. And after 20 years on TV, there was actually discussion one episode. It was the first episode of the season. Jeff had a discussion with the contestants, and he said, look, from now on, I'm just going to drop the word guys. Not going to use that anymore. Yeah, he got some pushback, but it was so inspiring to see that even something that was, well, it felt like it was such a core element of the show. He said it every single episode, and yet he was
willing to change.
He was willing to change. And you know what? I have an example for you from agriculture too. So this is pretty cool. In July 2022, the Canadian Cattlemen's Association dropped the men's from their name. And heck, you know, Survivor's been around for 20 years, but the Canadian Cattlemen's Association was 90 years old when they changed their name to the Canadian Cattle Association. So I think that's a really inspiring story. They changed their name after 90 years. They did, in fact, just drop it. They didn't change it to Cattle Persons, right? It's just Canadian Cattle Association. And I think that's really interesting.
And I think I just want to interrupt a sec here too. I've been writing for Progressive Dairy magazine now for 8 years, and it used to be called Progressive Dairyman's magazine. Same thing, Emily. They are now known as Progressive Dairy. So I think that's encouraging, and in the magazine and agriculture industry to use different language that's helpful. But go ahead with your thought where you wanted to go next.
Well, I just think that it's interesting that this happened. This is still pretty recent news, 2022. If we look back a little bit further in history, the Ontario Cattlemen's Association changed their name in 2013. But get this, proposals to change the name had been raised in 2007 and all the way back to 2002. right? And that's just the
Wow.
recorded history. So people were probably talking about it before then. And I think it just goes to show us that it takes a while for people to get used to the idea of changing something that seems so fundamental to the organization.
Well, and you and I address a lot of audiences as professional speakers. We're both members of the Canadian Association of Professional Speakers, which is a great community to be part of and to be belonging and learning and growing and sharing, which is kind of the 4 pillars of what that association looks like. But it always hits me when a speaker is at the front of the room, and I experience this often as a farm family coach speaker, where I'm sitting in the audience and the person at the front says, well, guys, how are you doing together today? And I just go, and quite typically, I may actually be in an audience that is 80% male and 20% female. And it just is a little bit irritating that, no, I'm not a guy, and I'm a farmer, I'm a farm partner, and we all have different labels that we use, but words become habits and very habitual. So tell us, Emily, about your experience recently when you presented this in Quebec City, and the reaction that you got from your message that words are important.
Yeah, I had the distinct privilege to open up the annual convention of Canadian Association of Professional Speakers, and so I gave a version of my keynote. So it was just 20 minutes. I had a very short time to make my point, and I showed why this is really relevant for speakers, right? You and I and all of the people in our association have tremendous influence. We speak to so many people every year. And so the words that we use in particular have a even bigger ripple effect than for some folks. And so the words that we use can really change. You talk about sitting in an audience, and sometimes you feel like they're not talking to you, right? And I feel the same way. And so what happened after I gave my keynote was that we heard many other speakers experiment with their language. Yes, correct themselves. But what was great for me is that they were having fun with it. So when it comes to language, sometimes people think like, oh, you're being the language police. Oh, this is not that important. And it's just like something to be picky about. And so it's great to be able to bring that message in a way that A, shows people it's important. B, shows people that there are creative ways to change. And see that it's okay to practice and make mistakes. Like if you don't take yourself so seriously, you hear yourself use the word guys, or, address the crowd as like ladies and gentlemen or something, and you can think, oh yeah, if you correct yourself, I mean, this, audiences don't want us to be perfect, right? They want us to make mistakes. Yeah.
So what are your suggestions for better language then? If and I catch myself as well. So when I'm addressing an audience, I'll use the word folks. Hey folks, great to see you today. Rather than hey guys, or come to the table guys, or it's very habitual. So Emily, what are some words that land better and create better habits and make everybody feel like they're important to be there? Because I think you and I can use this in an audience, but for farm families who are listening to this, it also happens in board meetings, committee meetings, farm family team meetings. And my main intention in having you on this podcast today is, what do you say to farm women? Because there's even controversy in farm women in agriculture. Do you call yourself a farm wife? Some people say yes, some say no. Some people say farm partner. Some people just say farmer. Like, there's many different iterations of how people identify what their role is in agriculture, women in agriculture. So what would your suggestions be?
Well, my suggestions are kind of the easy ones. Do what comes easily to you. So for you, it sounds like folks is quite a natural switch. I like to say to people, just drop it. Do like Jeff Probst on Survivor, just drop it. Same thing with what I said about the Canadian Cattlemen's Association, right? They just dropped the gender signifier. So it's Canadian Cattle Association. If you drop the word guys, you end up speaking as if you're talking to just one person. And sometimes that's even more effective than addressing the group. Definitely there are times where you need to address the group. Like if everybody's been talking and now you need to get their attention back to the front of the room, you sometimes need to say something like, hey, everyone, or, can I get you to direct your attention back up here? But in general, I like to just not say anything, not replace the word.
Right.
Just drop it. The other thing is that sometimes people need to know a way to disrupt the conversation if they would like someone else to use different words, and that can be tricky. My favorite disruptor, someone will say, "Hey guys," and if I get the opportunity, is just, big smile, look around, I say, "Are we all guys here?" And that causes people to think again. Sometimes people will come back with, "Well, to me, it's gender neutral." Okay. And I used to just say, all right, or depending on the situation, I might have a chance to explain to them why it doesn't feel gender neutral to me. But now I can just say, "Hey, that's cool. If you want to watch my TED Talk, and you'll see another side."
Right. And so you're not making it into a battle or a controversy. You're just making a very positive suggestion to help people feel like they've been seen and heard. Yeah. That's what I would think. So Emily, tell me more about what you've learned about your example of protective equipment for women. You have been on manufacturing lines and different kinds of engineering jobs and whatnot. And tell the story about when you were getting company shirts.
Yeah, this example crosses all industries, right? So I talk about personal protective equipment not fitting, but what happens when it comes to like the company swag? And I can imagine this might happen for some smaller farm teams, right? You want to get like golf shirts or sweatshirts or t-shirts for everybody. And the default is to just order the unisex or the men's sizing. Someone will come around to my office and say, "Okay, we're getting new shirts. What size do you want?" Well, I don't know. Like, are we talking about men's sizes? Because that's usually they haven't even thought of it. So it's default to men's sizes. Where's the size chart? The thing is, like, if we're going to get new swag, if you want to have company shirts, like, people want to feel good in the clothes that they're wearing. So like maybe it's for a company picture for your Christmas card or something. You don't want to be wearing clothes that don't fit well. And my example is golf shirts with sleeves down to your elbows, because that's always what happens when they order men's or unisex sizing. So I tell people, hey, if you're going to put us in nice clothes for when the senior execs are coming to town or for the company picture or whatever, I want to look good.
Even in our case, in our farm, we've started ordering children's Carhartt hoodies as well as the ones for men and women, because the logo and the quality of the Carhartt hoodie was so well received that now families are saying, "Hey, can my kids have those?" And for us, it's been great to pay attention to that, because now we have great advertising right down to the littles as well. And so that's been a good thing. So Emily, with these hearts longing of these women that I was speaking to from grain farmers, where they worked really hard. They've proven their expertise with, 10, 15 years of agronomy, just like you've proven your expertise as an engineer. And yet, what do you think is the unconscious bias or just literal bias for them not to even be considered to be the next leader of management on that farm?
Well, in some areas like agriculture and engineering, women are still lagging far behind. Like, if you look at law and medicine, women have made great strides, and we're seeing a more balanced representation. But in agriculture, I think, I don't, here's what I think. I think that for someone who is fully qualified, like you said, fully qualified agronomist or something, and they want to take on the farm, I think we need to see more role models. We need to, in engineering, there's a big push to make sure that the young women and girls coming into engineering programs have lots of role models that they can see. That's really important. And I think that's really important for convincing perhaps the prior generation, like, hey, look, someone else is doing it and I can do it too. We have to be a little bit careful sometimes about doing too much of that, promoting just the role models, because there is like a survivorship bias in that, right? The people that we're seeing are the ones who succeeded, and that's great. But also we need to understand what are the systemic factors that are holding other people back, because for every great role model that we see held up, there are probably a bunch of others who tried that path and didn't reach their goal.
Right. And I guess the other thing is, I also have a saying, love does not read minds. And so you can't assume what the other person is thinking, feeling, needing, or wanting. And that's why I really appreciate your message so much in terms of, words become habits and then habits become behaviors. And I also think from what you said earlier in this podcast that I would like listeners to not make assumptions about what people are thinking and to use more words and more directness. And Brene Brown says, being clear is kind. So being able to ask, well, I'm just curious, Dad, you seem to have a lot of resistance to me being the next manager on this farm. Could you just let me know why you're feeling that way? And then we can have a more robust conversation to create solutions around that. So
yeah, I would love to know that answer from somebody who maybe had brothers, because here's the thing, Elaine, I grew up with only sisters, and we grew up on the farm where my mom grew up. She had only sisters as well. So we didn't have a lot of this gender dynamic at home, right?
No, because you were doing the work and your mom was driving the grain truck down to the elevator, right?
Right.
Yeah. So, and I have cousins, 5 daughters in one farm family, and they are all very adept at driving equipment and were trained, no issues there. And one of them did get her degree in agriculture and continued to be a primary producer. So I think my intention, Emily, and having you voice your message is just that people really know that words have impact and words have power. And we see a lot of agriculture suffering at the moment with procrastination and conflict avoidance. And I would like to tell listeners that conflict is a really good thing if it's resolved. But in that conflict, you need to stay calm and respectful. And not calling me a guy is respectful to me. So I really appreciate it when, and I actually have, this is what I've done in action since I've heard listen to your TED Talk, is when I hear other women speakers or people that I'm in conversation with address an entire room of women as guys, I just very gently go up to them afterwards and say, I have this friend named Emily Nichols, and she has this really good TED Talk. Maybe you'd like to watch it. And no judgment here, but just so you know, calling us women a bunch of guys is maybe not the best choice of words. And actually, when I've done that with a little bit of courage and curiosity, it's had a very positive outcome to just sort of spread the word that our words are really important. So, Emily, what are you working on next?
Oh, it's interesting you asked that. I have a meeting this afternoon to think about my 2024 goals. I want to take this message further. So, in preparation for today's podcast and thinking about the history of some of these ag organizations and the name changes they've gone through, even just that little bit of research has opened my eyes to even more ways to customize. So coming back to that, really connecting with people, that's my fundamental thing, really. I want to always connect really well with people, connect better, connect with more people. So how can I adapt this message and take it further? In 2023, I went to South Africa and I presented this talk a couple of times. So of course I had to adapt the message so that it was not just Canadian statistics, obviously, but taking into account the situation and statistics from South Africa and from Africa more generally. So I think that's my challenge for 2024 is how far can I take this message? Having seen the response at our CAPS convention, I think it's needed. I think it's time. And I think I can do it in a way that people receive it well and it doesn't come across as an accusation or a divisive topic.
So how do people find your TED Talk?
So people can find my TED Talk, type in Emily Nichols TEDx in any browser. I'm just going to spell Nichols for you because there are a lot of misspellings. So it's Nichols. And Emily Nichols TEDx, it'll come up. It's called What If We Didn't Have to Be One of the Guys?
Great. Okay. And it's been a pleasure having you on today. And I also want to say thank you for the shout outs that you did in that TEDx talk to agriculture as well, because we're 2% of the population in Canada. And there's a lot of people who sometimes don't feel seen and heard. And I think you're making a great inroad that, Emily, just as an encourager to help us understand that our words are important. They become habits. Habits become behavior. And we all want much more positive outcomes for the succession and legacy of agriculture from generation to generation as farms transition. So thanks for your time together, and I look forward to seeing the next iteration of where your keynotes go. All the best. And thanks, folks. Yeah, thanks, Emily. And Emily also, as a female engineer, is out there as well for any of you listening who have sons and daughters looking at the field of engineering, because I, as a farm family coach, have come across many mechanical civil engineers who liked their career in corporate, but eventually wanted to come back to the love of the farm and the passion for farming. So you can find Emily Nichols online and reach out to her too if you're looking for someone. I'm pretty sure she could connect you to some good mentorship. That's all for today, folks, and we look forward to seeing you next time on the Farm Family Harmony podcast. And thank you for your comments and your feedback. And if you want to reach out to our team for a discovery call, just go to farmfamilycoach.com/contact. See you next time. Bye.